All right, hello. I'm joined here today by a University of Texas Austin alumni, former managing partner of Raising Cane's, and co-founder and CEO of Dillas, Mr. Kyle Gordon.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so I know your backstory, and most people that go into your restaurant can see it that it's on the board. But could you go ahead and describe it a little bit, just a brief summary of how you got to where you are?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Kyle Gordon. I'm the founder and CEO of Dillas Quesadillas. And the dream for Dillas, and I'm not going to use too much of your time on the on the intro for that because I could do like an hour on it alone. Started way back in college. So you mentioned the University of Texas at Austin. That's where I got my start. That's where I really had the idea for Dillas. And so quickly thereafter, I started, thinking about like what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, what I wanted it to look like. During that time, Chipotle and some other kind of fast casuals were starting to emerge. This is like in the early 2000s. And so I was like, man, like this is a really cool thing. Like I want to do a restaurant like this because I wasn't the brainiest kid. I wasn't going to get like, some fancy business degree or anything else on that realm. And so that was like a big piece of, what I wanted to do is like become an entrepreneur. And so this idea was a really big piece of that. The idea is everything. So asked the guy who ended up being my future wife's uncle. Maggie is the co-founder of Dillas, and she was like, I met her in college. She has been on this journey the whole time. And she's like, hey, you should talk to my uncle. His name is Stuart. He's in the restaurant business. And I did talk to him, and he's like, well, get a job and see if you love restaurants before we ever do anything with this Dillas idea. And so graduated from UT, moved up to Dallas, applied for a job as a shift manager at Raising Cane's, for $12 an hour, and worked there for 7 years. I was very, very lucky from a timing perspective that I was able to say, start there, got promoted to GM within 3 or 4 months for a couple of different factors that we can go into later if necessary. And then they ended up moving their primary headquarters from Baton Rouge to Dallas. And so that was a huge deal for me because it brought a lot of growth to Texas. It brought Raising Cane's and all the leadership there. And so pretty quickly, I start training lots and lots of people. So I become a certified training restaurant managing partner. And there was only 3 of us at the time out of 100 locations. And so I got to experience a ton of education through that. And so I took a lot of that experience, and I still had the idea for Dillas in my back pocket. And I came to a fork in the road, so to speak, about 7 years in, and was like, I'm either going to go all in on this Raising Cane's thing, or I'm going to go all in on Dillas and take the leap. And so I started Dillas in 2013 and haven't ever looked back. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I talked to another dude. He's actually like a LinkedIn mutual between me and you. So I interviewed him. One of the quotes he told me was, get experience on someone else's dime. Do you agree with that quote?
Oh, of course. I mean, the way I like to put it is looking at the experience and looking at the opportunity as a sponge, right? And so really being able to like squeeze that sponge, right? And so with Raising Cane's, it was amazing. I always smiled when I went in because I was like, they're paying me to learn. They're paying me to, get to experience all these things. And so I never looked at it as them using me. I always looked at it as me using them, right? And really squeezing them and for every experience I could possibly get. So I volunteered for like every committee. I wanted to be the training restaurant. I wanted to be the testing restaurant. I wanted to, I went up to they would like get tired of me up there, but they call it the restaurant support office, the RSO. It was only like 10 minutes from my restaurant. And so I would drive up there to like make copies and do other things that, to expose myself to a lot of the different leadership up there. And so, yeah, man, I was just all in on being exposed to those opportunities. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I agree 100%.
So you said your time at Raising Cane's is you learning. When do you know it's time that you know enough and you're ready to start Dillas and start with your idea and leave your career behind?
Gosh, that's such a hard question because it's different for everybody, you know? So my experience share is, I think it's timing based, you know, like you have this kind of like, or at least I did, this gut feel. And a lot of the time that I was at that, you know, in that career at Canes, I was also studying a lot. So I would read books because I knew that my ultimate dream was to do my own thing, whether it was going to be, you know, in real estate or opening my own restaurant or another business idea or helping somebody else with a business idea or something like that. You know, entrepreneurial kind of passion and blood is in me, you know, and so it was going to happen eventually. And so the books that I would read, like Rich Dad Poor Dad is an example. Like I read every book in his series, right? Whether it was like about investing or whether it was about like how to get started or your first like few years, you know, of being an entrepreneur and how scary that can be. And so a lot of that helps build the confidence that if somebody else can do it, I can do it, even if it's hard, you know? And so I think that was a really big piece of it. And there's no like perfect time, you know, there's no like, you know, oh, I've got all the knowledge, I can do it myself, you know, or all the clients, you know, that I have for this company, they'll all leave with me, you know, and go when I leave or something like that. That's, I don't think kind of how it works. I think that everything's earned. And so I made some assumptions when I did leave on sales and on, you know, people and on capital and all these other things that based on what I thought I knew, you know, and then you learn what is real. And that's a whole different story. And so, you know, there's no perfect time, but for me, it came down to that fork in the road. I was like convicted, you know what I mean? Like it was like, I really want to do this Dillas thing. I really want to figure this out. And so it ended up taking over a lot of conversations. And so I think that there can be, you know, really good like indicators. And when you start thinking about it, dreaming about it, like, you know, the universe kind of is conspiring around helping you out. You bring it up and people are like, ooh, I know somebody who can maybe help you with that. Or, oh, that's a great idea. You get all these signs and signals. And for me, you know, some of it was we were going to have to move cities. And at that point, it was like, okay, I know that I can run a single location. I know that there's limited downside risk if I find the right opportunity to open my first Dillas. And so, you know, it just came down to finding the right people to kind of help me do that. And then just going for it and leaping. You know, leap and the net will appear was another quote at the time that I kind of gravitated towards. I was like, you know what, like I'm going to jump and just have the blind faith that I will be able to figure it out. So, yeah.
So in this, it's a leap of faith, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once you took that leap of faith, what did the process of securing funding for Dillas look like?
Yeah. So for me and for restaurants, you know, Dillas is a restaurant. And so basically a startup restaurant for banks is the equivalent of a hand grenade with no pin in it. They don't want to have anything to do with it. It's very risky. It can explode at any moment and kill everybody in the room, right? And so that's restaurants. And so getting funding traditionally was not going to be an option for me. I also had restaurant operations experience, but I didn't have restaurant ownership experience. And those are two different things. And none of my partners had restaurant ownership experience either. And so from a traditional financing perspective, that really wasn't going to be, you know, something that could happen. So I knew it was going to be friends and family, most likely, or the other option probably would have been something like, you know, private, funding or a high net worth individual that was a friend or family or something like that. And so the other thing that Maggie and I had was some savings, which was a really big deal. I've been working for 7 years. Maggie and I live very conservatively, so we didn't have like a Bentley and a mansion, like it was, we'd done a good job saving some money and stockpiling a little bit because we knew that one day we wanted to start our own business. And so when I left, the pre-work for Dillas was probably a year, so if I opened in end of 2013, the kind of like really getting serious about it and figuring out how much money, what the business plan's going to look like, all of that started probably in, late 2011. Like it's a lot of work, a lot of thought, a lot of talking to different people, research and all that type of good stuff. There was no crowdfunding back then. There was no, chat GPT to like help you like write a business plan in 30 minutes, like, or vet your stuff out. It was all like, download a business plan template and fill it out and like go do your research and read the books, like, so it was a lot of like a big research study essentially. And so we had our money and then we went to Maggie's parents, since we were leaving either to go to Austin or we were going to stay to start Dillas. They were like, like this is a really good idea. Maggie's mom, her brother, Stuart, thought it was a good idea. And, they trusted him and his opinion of kind of the business. And so it was like, okay, like let's put enough money into this thing where we can start it, see if we can get one open. So, we ended up raising that capital and, finding the right team in terms of architect and construction and all that type of good stuff to get it open.
So the money came from family, right?
Yeah.
So what did the conversation look like? Like, how did you convince them that, oh, this idea is where you should put your money towards?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of begging. No, I'm just kidding. I think that I did approach it very professionally. Mm-hmm. So in hindsight, though, I believe that a massive point of leverage for me was that Maggie was pregnant and that her parents really didn't want us to go down to Austin because then they'd probably never see us again, right? Mm-hmm. And so they were like, you know what, like this will be a great investment and a potential for a family business. It will keep our grandkids here in North Dallas, and it's also a good idea. And so a lot of those conversations were around, my naivete around how much I needed, honestly. And because those early conversations, I would show them the business plan, show them kind of like what the idea was, and they would be like, okay, like this sounds pretty good. How much money do you and Maggie need to have to live? Like how much do you think you can actually take out of this business in the first year or two? Your numbers seem a little bit low. Why don't we need to make sure that you don't come back to us and be like, hey, I only asked for $100,000. I needed 500. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's like, we need to really make sure that this can is well capitalized enough to make it to, the first year or two is really the hardest. And so if we don't have enough money to get through that and you have to come back, then that's going to be a really big challenge. So, let's fund it for that. And if it takes off, then great. But if it doesn't, we've kind of got that baked in backup plan to, survive the kind of like storm. And those conversations, I remember being really exciting, like going to dinner, talking about it, going over to their house, looking through the numbers, looking at the opportunity, thinking about the legal structure, how it was going to work. And it was like, like you go from kind of the, I don't know, like corporate world, to where everything is just like very, kind of done for you or whatever. And then you go into this new world of like raising money, starting something new, being creative, structuring, legal, tax, like all these things that are like, it's it is just completely different world. It's like going from like the comfort of like, just imagine being in your house and having AC, TV, and all of that. That's the kind of like normal W-2 world. And then the world of the entrepreneur is like, here's a knife and a jeans and a t-shirt and like dropping you in the wilderness. You know, like it's kind of like that. It's like, can you survive out here? And, you know, find your way and find your path and do the things necessary to, you know, build a meaningful business. And so, yeah, those conversations were really great. Reflecting back on them, it's difficult to even think through what was said. You know, like it moves slow and fast at the same time. You know, and so, but you know, at the end of the day, like we did find a way to get it funded. You know, I think that we had like a couple rounds of like, hey, you know, we need you to commit to this amount. Let's call it $400,000. Commit to this, and we'll only ask for 100 at a time. We're not going to take it all, right? And so if we don't need some, then great. But if we need it all, we need to know that you're there for us. And so that's kind of how it worked. And it was a fun experience getting that first round. And you know, we're very lucky that we were able to raise it with only 2 people, and there still are only 2 investors. And so I think that, you know, a lot of people aren't able to do that and have to look at different, you know, means of funding, or wouldn't start such a capital intensive business. And, you know, looking back, I wouldn't change a thing, but, you know, knowing that it was going to be that expensive to get it going and to get it to scale, you know, it might make me rethink how I did it, how I leveraged it, or even what business to get in the first place, you know?
So in a lot of ways, you leveraged your situation to gain funding, right? Like your wife's pregnancy and then moving.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's all, I mean, that's the game. You know what I mean? Like it's any wedge of leverage that you have has to be exercised. Or at least, you know, I don't think that was, here's the thing. If I went to them and I was like, I want to sell, you know, strawberry syrup flapjacks, you know, like that are like, you know, frozen and like, and I'm going to put like licorice on them. They'd probably, that's a stupid idea. I don't care how pregnant Maggie is, like, see you later, go down to Austin and, you know, like whatever. That was probably consideration set number 3 or 4 for them, in terms of like, oh, it's a happy bonus that it will keep them here in DFW, right? But we could have opened one and then opened our second one in Austin and moved, you know, or like something like that. So I don't think that was all of it. I think that the big advantages were, hey, listen, like we've secured what we think is a really good location. We have a lot of intel around this location because it's right next to a very successful Raising Cane's. It is in our wheelhouse in terms of being affordable, has a short lease on it. It's the right size for us. It has a drive-through, and so that was a big piece of it as well. We did a big kind of friends and family taste testing, and had a lot of different quesadillas and, you know, a lot of different things that we were going to launch with. And everybody at the party was very excited and was like, man, like this is really cool. I could see myself going here. So there was some validation as well. And I think that the business plan was good, very detailed, lots of information, and as accurate as could be and was possible. You had my experience in terms of kind of what I was bringing to the table in terms of operations and connections in the community. So there was a lot that went into the kind of like, you know, helping validate why it would be a good idea to place money here. And I will say that the restaurant business, what I've come to learn is it's a lot like the alcohol business. It's not always like extremely profitable with lots of cash along the way, but you're building a brand, and that brand can be extremely valuable once you've kind of grown it to a tipping point, where it's like starting to get recognition and it's starting to get a little bit scary for other competitors. and people have to start paying attention to you, you know? And so you can build massive amounts of value for kind of like the later phases. But from, you know, zero till then, there's this, it doesn't spit off tons and tons of cash along the way because you need to reinvest that cash to grow your enterprise.
So once you secured the money from your in-laws, where did you allocate the money? What parts of the business got prioritization, and then which ones didn't?
Yeah. So first you get the money, then you get the power, then you get the girl. Just kidding. That's a Scarface quote. And so in terms of the capital, the way you open a restaurant is you find a site, right? So first things first, we found a site, and then you got to lock that site down. So we got to get a lease, right? And so you have to dump some money into legal because you got to negotiate the lease. That process is typically not super duper fast, you know? So we thought it could take 4 weeks. It took like 3 months, you know? So there's a lot of things along the way where you're like, man, this should go fast. It really doesn't. It goes super slow. And so after that, it's like, oh, great, we got a lease. This is awesome. Now let's get an architect, right? And so you hire an architect, you get, you know, your plans drawn, and you've got a good set. And then you're like, okay, well, how's the kitchen going to work? And so you lay out that kitchen design, and you lay out that kind of like equipment plan. And that's a really big piece of the capital, right? So let's just say that we're going to build a new restaurant for $1,000, right? And those numbers are way too low. It's probably closer to $1 million, right? So, but easy math, you're like, okay, I need to spend like $20 of that 1,000 on the architect to get that going, and then you got to spend like, let's see here, $3,000 on the equipment of that 1,000. So it's a massive part of the outlay. So we spent money on that. We spent money on the construction and like kind of redoing the building because it was an old crap Jack in the Box from 1999. And it was not falling apart because the bones were good and it was built well. But, you know, like we had to completely redo the roof and pull an AC unit off. And, you know, like there was all sorts of like, you know, crap in the drains. Like we had to jet out and like, you know, just get it completely clean and fresh. And so the construction was like, of that, in our $1,000 example, another 3,000. So we've already spent like 6,000 of our full $1,000 that we need to kind of get going. And so you after that, you get that equipment in there, you get the construction done, and then you've got that restaurant. And all along the way, you're kind of needing to keep a savings account ready for your team, your employees. So that's where kind of the next layer of allocation went, is making sure that we had money to hire the right team and staff to be there on opening day. And then you got to have a marketing budget. And then you got to have, you know, kind of like that launch team, right? And so that's where basically all of it went. And then you open and you've got to have some capital ready to go in case you lose money in the first months. And, you know, that's pretty predictable, you know, to lose money. So yeah, that's kind of how the capital was, you know, deployed in that first, you know, I don't know, that was probably from early 2013. So maybe like April, and then we didn't open till December. So like there was a lot of time and like spending before anything was even coming in on the top line revenue.
Mm-hmm. So your $1,000 analogy, you said you spend 6,000 of the 1,000. Is that basically saying you have to spend more than what you have, or?
I'm sorry. That would have been in that analogy. It would have been 600.
600. Okay, yeah, that threw me off a little bit.
Yeah. So you know, let's go back and maybe just throw out some like real numbers. Mm-hmm. That 1,000's really more like 1 million, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just easier for reference. You might spend 300 of that on equipment, and then another 400,000 on, the build out construction, so you're kind of already 700 grand in. Then you got like all sorts of other stuff, right? It's office equipment, it's furniture, it's the signage package, that can be very expensive to get put in. It's, all the other little details. And then the pre-opening expense, is quite a bit, like you're running into pre-opening expense that is like, you're talking team members, all making, let's call it $15 an hour. You got 50 of them. You got to train them all for, 5-6 hours a day. And then do that for 2 weeks, and like all of a sudden you're looking at it and you're like, damn, I'm spending like a lot, tens of thousands of dollars and no money coming in. So yeah, it adds up quick.
Mm-hmm. So I should probably know this, but where is the first Dillas?
The first Dillas in Plano. Yeah. So Plano, right at Park and Midway, by Prestonwood Baptist Church.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. Yeah.
So once you had your first store up and running, what did scaling Dillas look like to what it is now?
Yeah. It looked like a lot of tears and crying at night. No, I'm just kidding. We're at 11 now. And so that means that we were on pace for one a year. And what it looked like was really trying to build a solid foundation at the first location. And that was very difficult. That was like, we've been open for 11 years, give or take. And 3 of those years were just at the first location. So 30% was just trying to get one working, and then after that, you can start the duplication process. And going from 1 to 2 is the most difficult. And then, the third one is a little less, difficult. And then they kind of get a little bit easier along the way because you have a pretty clear path on what it's going to look like. But they all offer different challenges because none of them just open with predictable sales, predictable employment, and all that type of good stuff. So the first location, I think did $725,000 its first year. And we're, kind of, like really wish it could have done a lot better because we were hoping more like 1.5 or 1.6 million because we knew that the volumes at successful QSR restaurants in the area were above 2 million. So we're like, oh man, we're really, struggling here. And turns out that wasn't that bad of a number, especially for our first year, first concept opening. But we needed to like really drive trial, really drive people into the restaurant and market this thing. And so we worked really hard at that. And we worked really hard at listening to our customers and saying, hey, what are we missing? Like, what do you guys want? Like, what's something that our product is, not quite, hitting on for you. And so we took a lot of that feedback and started implementing it in kind of year 1 and year 2. We had to, change the prices a lot because we mispriced a lot of things. We're selling it for way too cheap. There was a lot of difficult prep and process that needed to get tweaked. The training wasn't, it was never going to be perfect because you don't know what you're going to train on until you open and understand kind of what needs to be trained properly and how to take orders and how the POS is going to look and POS point of sale. And so there's just an immense amount of that kind of like ideation and like refinement that has to happen in that first couple of years. And so after that, we're like growing at about, 20% sales increase every year, which is really great because once you get more mature, that number can either be, could be negative, flat. It could be positive, low single digits. There's not just a ton of large companies that are doing like an organic double-digit same restaurant sales growth. And so we were at that time and we're like, oh man, like I think we've got something, right? Because people are not only coming back, but they're telling a friend and we're starting to get some traction, right? And so the third year we were like, okay, I think that we did $1.5 million and our break even was probably like 800 or 900, so it was like there was some decent profit to be shown, enough to where we could go to a bank and say, hey, listen, we've been open for years now. Like, myself and Maggie, like we know what we're doing. We know what we need to kind of tweak and change. And we feel really good about doing a second location. And so went to the bank, and the bank at that time, we needed to personally guarantee it. There wasn't enough strength for them to come out of pocket $300,000 or $400,000 just on the strength of the entity, the Dillas Quesadillas LLC. And so they were like, we'll give you the money, but you guys need to still stand behind this and personally guarantee it. So I was like, okay, sounds great. And so we did that, got the money put together, raised a little bit more money through friends and family. Maggie's uncle actually came in and was like, I'll put a little bit of money in. And so we got that second one open. It was a success. And then we were like, we really need to, expand and keep this momentum going. We've got to like bust our butt to get to a certain point of locations to get market penetration. Mm-hmm. So we opened a third one, and that one broke sales records, did great. And we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This one's doing really good. And, we broke all sorts of things, pissed off so many customers, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But like, then you fix those things and you get ready to do it again. Right. And so around that time, our first franchisee, who was my boss at Raising Cane's, his name's Pete. He had left Cane's and was like, dude, I want to get in the business. I want to own my own thing. What do you think about partnering up on Dillas? And I was like, okay, cool. Let's try it, because it gets us in a new state. It helps, kind of validate the concept. And if you're successful in a different state, it will help accelerate our growth. So he opened his first one, and his first year, he did our third year of sales. Right. So like, he didn't open on the same curve we did, even though he was in a new city and a new state. He opened 3 years ahead. And so we're like, oh, wow, like that's amazing. That's really cool. So he was very successful. And so that was late 2018. 2019, we didn't really have any new growth. We were trying to open one in Denton, Texas, but it kind of was a little bit rocky in terms of getting it done with the landlord. And so we ended up pausing on that for a little bit, try to find some new money to capitalize the concept. And then 2020 happened, and kind of everything shut down. And it was like a year of kind of not chaos, I wouldn't say, but it was a year of, adaptation and just trying to keep our team and customers safe. That was the first priority. Sales became a second priority. Survival was the main thing. Mm-hmm. But since we had drive-thrus, we ended up having, a really, pretty strong COVID. You know what I mean? Like, we grew a lot. We got introduced to a lot of new people because it was, convenient. It was different. People wanted to try new things at that time. They were stuck at home, so they're tired of, they couldn't go out or drive to, McDonald's or some of these other traditional QSRs. And so they're on their phones looking for different things to order. And they're like, oh, Dillas, this looks good. Quesadillas is a comfort food. So we grew a lot. During that time. Then 2021 came around, and that Denton location came back to us. We opened it. It set sales records, and we're like, oh man, like, we've really got something. And then Pete opened 2 more locations that year, and those were super successful, broke sales records. And so we're like, oh man, this is great. And then so we kept growing, kept signing up new locations. Some of this stuff was, a lot of this stuff was bank loans, additional bank loans. But at this point now, we could cross-collateralize those and say, hey, listen, these two make money. And so Maggie and Kyle aren't going to sign to guarantee this. But what we will say is that if we're not paying you, you can take the money out of these 2 piggy banks. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, oh, okay, cool, we'll do that. So that's kind of how you grow and leverage the assets that are performing. Mm-hmm. And so did that. We got up to 4. We got a new capital partner who came in and said, this is interesting. Let's put in a little bit of money. And so they put in some money. So we opened number 5 and number 6, the one that you go to in West Frisco, yep. And then the one in Forney. And then Pete also opened 2 new locations in 2 college markets with 2 different types of new prototypes. Those are in Ruston and Nacogdoches. And so that kind of brings you full circle to where we are now. So to answer your question, a lot of the scale was a mix of outside capital, inside bank, traditional capital, Maggie and I reinvesting the profits back into the business, never taking anything out. So our own reinvestment in the reinvestment of our original capital and investment group, and then the leverage of franchising, right? So we don't put any money into those new locations. It's a business opportunity for Pete and his group. So they put the money in to open it, and then they send us a royalty because we started the brand and we support him through all sorts of various services. So that's its own form of leverage.
So Dillas runs on like a franchise model, basically.
Well, we have both, you know, so like we're a hybrid. Most are, you know, Subway is only a franchise model because they had company owned restaurants, but now they're 100% franchised. Chipotle is a fully company owned, you know, where all of them are corporate locations. I think they tried franchising it and they, you know, didn't work out and they kind of like scaled back on that. You know, McDonald's and Jack in the Box and Wendy's, like these like bigger kind of QSRs are a blend. And we're a blend also, right? And so right now we're basically a 50-50 blend, you know, whereas as you get bigger, there's no real way that you can keep up with franchise growth because there's just, it'd be like if there was 10 of me and all 10 of me were out there trying to open as many Dillas as possible, right? And then there's me, the company owner.
Yeah.
Like it's not possible for me to keep up with the other 10, right? And so typically the franchise business outstrips the company on locations. And so, you know, our, you know, 6 company on locations will likely grow slowly, right? So it'll be like 6, then 7, and then all of a sudden in DFW, we've got 25 or 30. But then you'll look outside of DFW in the franchise system, and there might be 200 or 300. Right? Because they're in different cities and different parts of the United States and they're all growing their own different little companies. And so that's kind of the blend that we're looking for is to be kind of in the 25% company owned and then 75% of the system would be franchise based. So, yeah, go ahead.
I watched this movie. It's called The Founder. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
So in the movie, there was a period of time where they would rapidly growing McDonald's and like signing a bunch of franchisees, but the actual restaurants that they were running, like the quality was decreasing.
Yeah.
So how do you know, or like, are there any signs that you're either, what's the word, expanding too fast or too slow? Like, is there like a happy in between?
Yeah, I think that the happy in between really starts at the beginning, right? It's more about who you're working with, you know, and there's tons of lessons from, you know, failures and successes in the franchise business, which is great because there's so many examples of what not to do, right? And a lot of times that inconsistency comes from poor operations, and those poor operations are based on the operator's kind of lack of experience from the get-go, right? And so a dentist would not, even if he had $1 million, wouldn't be a good fit for a Dillas, right?
Yeah.
Because that's not where his expertise lies, you know? Like what we're looking for in a franchisee is a known restaurant operator because it's a very, very difficult game. You know, you've got to really be great at people politics. You know, you got to really be able to build a strong team, be a great leader, work nights, work weekends, go out into the community and represent your product and get people in the restaurant. You've got to be able to put up with all the different, you know, R&M and, you know, challenging things that happen at the restaurant, whether it's to the building or whether it's the equipment. You know, all this stuff gets like put through the ringer and it costs a lot of money to repair it. So you're really looking for the right person to want to do it, to want that opportunity. And typically the wrong person is the one that you hear the story about, you know? And so for us, the growth, we're only going to grow as fast as we can, you know, attract and support great operators. That's really the key. And the best thing about having successful company-owned restaurants is that I have no pressure to sign franchisees. I don't care. I make enough money on my company-owned locations to never have to sign another franchisee in my life, you know? So that is its own form of leverage. That is the pressure piece, you know, is like this is a successful company without franchisees. And so we can be extremely selective on who we want to be in the same room with, because it is a real marriage. And one of the best ways that somebody has put franchising to me recently is that you have a Ferrari and you're renting it, right? So I have a Ferrari, and if I was going to rent it to you, I better be damn sure that, you know, you're going to take care of it. You're not going to burn the tires off of it. You're not going to go do donuts and hood rat crap like in an intersection. You're not going to crash it into somebody's house and create a bunch of turmoil for me and you know, everything else. So you're renting a Ferrari. So you got to make sure that who you're renting it to is extremely responsible and that they are going to treat it like they should. And, you know, ultimately you want them to rent it forever.
Yeah.
You know, like you want them to rent it and be so successful that they can kind of rent more Ferraris, you know, or be so successful that they can maybe eventually buy their own Ferrari one day, you know, and kind of do it themselves, like grow their company, add a bunch of people, be super successful. That is how great franchise companies grow. They grow on the success of their franchisees. That's the really critical piece. And it goes wrong, not necessarily because of the greed of the franchisor and growing too fast, but because of the, you know, lack of operational skill of the franchisee to be able to kind of execute on the playbook, or they're not making money, they get disinterested, like they're not committed enough, it's not what they were thinking. So there's just a lot that goes into it, but leadership, I think, is the best one-word answer to your question.
So we've talked a lot about your story and how you got it done, and I want to kind of apply it to today's day and age. So what advice would you give someone that has an idea but no money currently?
Don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. You know, perseverance, and a lot of it to me, I think, is like personality, you know, and I don't think that everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's like a 10% game, you know, so if you're in the 90, like just get used to being a sheep, you know, I'm just kidding. But you know, like there's so many opportunities for you as well, if you're not kind of inclined to do that, because there's entrepreneurs typically are, not skilled in the systems and the processes and the execution piece. And so they need lots of smart people around them to be successful. It's a symbiotic kind of relationship. And so whether it's like accountants that they need to work with them, or lawyers, or what, like all these different specialties that don't necessarily have to be entrepreneurial, but they can support the entrepreneurial dream, which supports the American dream, which drives our economy and all that type of good stuff. Yeah. And so if you are in that rare 10%, if you do have this like internal drive to be that creative leader, to kind of start your own thing, the best advice I can give is be investable. That's number one. Your idea, no matter how great it is, has to be executed, right? And so the kind of important, for me, the interesting thing was that I got the idea first, and then I built the kind of all the enabling goals and all of the other things that I needed to be able to execute on the idea, I built afterwards, right? A lot of times what will happen is somebody will go out and start their career and then get the idea, right? I had the idea first, and then I had to go get the experience, right? It's just different for everybody, you know? And so for me, I was very lucky because I was like, I want to open a quesadilla restaurant. Boom, right? And that was when I was like 20, 21, something like that. And so, man, that's great, because then my whole path ahead of me is very predictable. I know every domino that I need to kind of tip over to be able to achieve that last domino of like opening the unit, opening the restaurant. And so you've got to be investable. And so for me to be investable, I went out and got my 10,000 hours of experience, at 10,000 hours plus, honestly, at Raising Cane's. And to kind of bookend this, you know, this podcast and this interview, I wrung them out. I didn't just go there and be kind of like, oh, I'm just going to be an average employee. Like, no, I was the absolute best. I was the hardest worker. I stayed the longest hours because it was all, if I do this, it will shorten the time frame on when I can do what I really want to do, which is starting Dillas, right? And so those 7 years, if unfocused, may have taken 11 years. I may have lost, 4 years. I think that because of the different opportunities, because of the different things I was exposed to, because of how much I tried to wring out the experience, I was able to garner the right confidence to go it alone, to leave, to take the leap, and also create enough confidence in others that I was able to get the money put together. And confidence before competence, is sometimes like what you got to emote. You've got to be really confident and really convicted in what you want to do to be able to sell your vision to others, because it's all a sales game, and no matter what business you start, you're going to be selling something, and you got to sell yourself first.
So the guy I was talking about earlier that told me that quote also told me, don't try to be a jack of all trades, especially in like the early stages of starting a company. Do you believe in that?
Yeah. Well, to a certain extent, right? And so I'll describe it to you in this way. I certainly wasn't trying to be a jack of all trades. A lot of it was necessity, right? And I think the point that he's working towards there is don't occupy all the seats in your business, and those seats are like departmental, so for the longest time, Maggie and I were basically all of our accountability chart. It was like, okay, Kyle's the CEO. He's also in charge of legal. He's also in charge of real estate. He's also in charge of operations. He's also in charge of training, so it's like, oh, wow. And then Maggie, you're the president. You're also in charge of IT. You're also in charge of human resources, and you're also in charge of accounting. So you can't occupy all of those seats and do all of them at a really high level. And so as quickly as possible, you want to create the training of the seat that you want to vacate and hire for it. And so that's kind of what we did. We're like, all right, first things first, like if we want to open more locations, Kyle has to be out raising money, finding real estate, structuring legal, whatever it might be. So we need somebody in the operations seat. So we had to budget that, like hire for it, and all that type of good stuff, train it. And then I was able to put him in charge of all the locations, and I was able to go grow the brand, and that was one of the biggest leaps forward, is me just getting out of the operations and kind of like, over time, your aperture increases and you're like really, really focused on, like, for me, it was like just the quesadilla. And then it went to the kitchen, and then it went to the whole unit, and then it went to where can we open the next one? And then it goes to the whole area. And then from DFW, it goes to, okay, now we've got this additional state. Okay, now what's our opportunity? And I've zoomed out far enough to say our opportunity is the United States, whereas it was just the quesadilla on the grill, a little 10 by 10 piece of tortilla, And so that don't be a jack of all trades, I think for me translates into you're not an expert at everything. Do what you can to get by in those things and hire out the specialist as fast as you can, and financial permitting.
So last time we talked, you told me there's 3 things a company or businesses compete on. It's quality, service, and price, right? Are any one of those 3 supposed to be prioritized over the other, or are they all about equal?
Well, you can only be great at 2, right? And so like I think you want to just kind of know going into it which ones you want to be best at, And so there is no specifics around which ones that you want to choose. I think that, if you want to be high volume, like in this studio, you've got some bags of wires, right? And so like they're probably not the best at service. You might call that company and like you can never get a hold of them. Like there's nobody there. It's a shell company. But the quality is really great and they're cheap, right? So they're competing on quality and price, but service for them means nothing because it's a wire in a bag, you know? So for us, quality of the food and the product to make it craveable, super duper important. When you come to the restaurant, you don't want it to be a bad experience. It's got to be a great experience. You got to be excited and happy, and you got to leave fulfilled and joyful and like, man, like I had fun there, and like they were so nice to me, and I trust them to make me a great product, and they smiled. And so all that's super important. We don't compete on price because to get quality and to get service, it costs money. Right. And so we're not going to be able to provide quality and service at a low price. Right. Same thing with like Louis Vuitton. Mm-hmm. When you go into Louis Vuitton, you're expecting extremely nice leather, great design. You're expecting a salesperson who is very professional, very nice, very helpful. Right. But then you're going to pay $3,500 for a bag of leather.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So everybody has to compete on different things. And there's really no way to master all three pieces of the triangle. And I may have given you this example when we were kind of talking earlier. What you can do is be the best at one part, right? So Walmart is a pretty decent example of not caring about quality, not caring about service, right? There's not usually people out in the aisles that are like, "Oh, hello, how can I help you today?"
Yeah.
Like there's nobody around, right? Like you pick your own crap, right? And then on the quality side, you don't go there to get Louis Vuitton. You know what I mean? Like you're going there for a $7 t-shirt, you know, which is fine. It's just like what you go there to get, cheap stuff, right? But the quality is not always going to be the best, the most long living grill you've ever bought, you know? They just own price. They're freaking the best at price. They negotiate their contracts so hard for their customers that there's no way that you and I could go anywhere else and buy a Huffy bicycle for cheaper than Walmart. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's like, I know that I'm not going to get service. I know I'm going to have to pull the bike off the rack myself, right? I know I'm going to have to drag it to the front, you know, like nobody's going to be helping me. The quality of this Huffy is not that great. It's going to fall apart in a couple of years, but my kid will be 2 years older by that point. He'll need a new bike anyways, right? But it is cheap, you know? And so they own that particular piece of the triangle. So yeah, it's, you know, when designing and thinking through the strategic competition in the market, that's a really important piece of it, because then you kind of know where you're going to compete. You know, like you need to know what's your kind of like core values and your mission, your vision, like the foundational stuff, the concrete of your business, what holds you down is going to be built around, you know, and it makes every decision after that so easy. You know what I'm saying? Well, we don't compete on price, so we're not buying that cheap chicken.
Yeah.
Right? It just is like, oh, and that saves so much time, and time is money.
So what you're saying is, for a business, at the beginning of a business, they should be deciding which one of the three or two of the three they want to like hammer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So would you say that certain different industries usually more commonly like compete in certain one of those threes?
No, I mean, nothing comes to mind necessarily. I think that like a good example, a contrarian example to the one that you just gave would be American Airlines or, you know, I think Qatar Airlines. There's like a really fancy one that Emirates.
Yeah.
Emirates. So you have Emirates and you have Southwest. So same industry, right? You know, like, oh, they're both airlines. They just fly people around. No, wrong, right? Southwest is cheap. And, you know, I think that their price and, you know, you could say price and service is what they're good at. It's fun. There's joking around. You have a good time, right? Like they make you feel good, right? So like service and cheap. Quality, no.
Yeah.
Quality, like it's a blue seat that is like got some padding in it. It's going to get you from A to B, and you're just hoping that it's safe, right? Emirates is different. They're about the experience, right? It's all about the quality, right? It's all about how big your seat is, how luxurious it is, how supple the leather is, how much food you get, how much free champagne you're getting, how hot the, you know, like the stewardess is, like all that stuff, right? So it's like, oh man, this is a real experience. So I've got amazing quality, I've got amazing service, and it costs $5,000.
Yeah.
Instead of $400, you know? And so same industry, two different strategies.
So for aspiring entrepreneur that wants to find money, are there any avenues that you've noticed nowadays that they could probably go into to find that money?
Again, like, don't search until you are prepared.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the first questions are like around validation. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, like, who are you? So like, what is your character, right? What is the, your credit worthiness, and then what is your capacity or cash flow to pay me back? So those are the 3 C's that the bank is going to ask you, and they're going to try to evaluate. So if you have nothing, it's very difficult, right? Because you automatically, eliminate them as a capital source. And so at least though, in that situation, the C of character, you could potentially have if you've done the legwork on, hey, I want to start an engineering company. I graduated from UT. I was top of my class engineering. I went and worked at Sparks Engineering for 3 years, and I was their lead best engineer. Now I want to start my own engineering company. Well, at least you have the character piece. Like you seem like a really good person. You have good, personal credit. Like that's the thing is like, whenever I'm talking to people, it's like you have to be investable.
Yeah.
I told you, we've talked about this today. It's like you can't have bad credit personally. You have to be a shining example of a person, just in general. Somebody that people like, somebody people want to hang out with, somebody people want to learn from, somebody people will loan money to and understand that they're going to get it back. Like your personal worthiness is a huge piece of like starting your entrepreneurial journey, and it's your company becomes the same thing, right? It is a lot of it is based on reputation. Right. And so building your reputation is really huge in terms of all of that. So, in terms of like going to get that money, that's step number 1. And then if possible, trying to get at least the semblance of the idea proven out. Right. And so for me, like starting the first location, there would have never been second locations, additional investment, or any of that stuff if I didn't just bootstrap, hustle, bust my butt to get the first one proven. Proof of concept is like a massive kind of like feather in your cap when you're kind of going out to raise the capital. Now, when it comes down to like let's just say you do have all those things, right? Or you have this idea that can just be like a game changer, which are like 1 in a million, right? Snapchats are like not normal.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like those things are super rare. You don't catch lightning in a bottle all the time, like all that type of stuff. So you have to assume that it's going to suck and that your idea is going to take a long time to get off the ground, right? Because it's just the way it is. So in that circumstance, you've got to build as much validity around your idea and talk to as many people in that business, in that space, to vet it, to challenge it, to refine it as much as humanly possible. If you're trying to just get enough seed money to see if it's even a decent idea, right? And so those funding sources are typically, they could be private investors, they could be, private equity, they could be, again, friends, family, relatives, any of that type of stuff, where you're just trying to get enough to kind of like see if it's going to be good. The problem a lot of, entrepreneurs get into in that circumstance though is that they give away all the equity that's going to make the idea valuable in the future, and so it's like, oh great, well, like I raised the money but now I only own 1% of it, so it has to do amazing for me to ever make any money off of it, right? And so there's so many different things and that's why like mentors, people who've done it before, advice, free advice, legal advice, all those things are so important. I don't know what the exact quote is, but like a pound of, effort is worth, like an ounce of, preparedness or something like that. It's like all about like how much like effort and preparation and planning that you put into it. Like 90% of it is that. 10% is the money.
So what you're saying is in those early stages, the most important thing is building your personal brand. right, and making yourself credible.
Yeah.
As your like business life goes on, would you say it's still as important in like now your stage now? Like, is your personal brand important throughout your entire entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, because the stakes are bigger for me. You know, like I'm not looking for $300,000 loans. I'm looking for $30 million loans, you know? And so my 10 or 11 years of reputation, all the people that I've met along the way, all the loans I've repaid, all of the landlords that I've made look good, like all those things like are all this kind of accumulation to maximize the next phase of growth and development and challenge for me personally. You know what I mean? Like it's not fun for me to go raise $300,000. Like I've done that, and it won't be additive to the vision that I'm trying to pursue for the team that I've built at Dillas, right? What they want me doing is going and adding a lot of new opportunity, right? So they have big opportunities, big dreams. And so when you're somebody who's working at Dillas, they want to have faith and conviction and courage that, you know, when they do what they need to do and, you know, move down their career path, that there's going to be a new restaurant waiting for them so they can make $80,000, $100,000 a year, whatever it might be, and kind of like continue down that career path with Dillas. And so my job is to go create that for them, you know, and a lot of your reputation and the conversations that you have, they just grow as your enterprise grows and as your kind of, you know, position in the industry grows. And as you get more and more experience, you become more and more of an expert, right? Like I dream in restaurant, you know what I'm saying? Like some people like dream about, you know, them playing with their dog or like throwing a football, you know what I mean? But like for me, I dream in business. I dream in kind of like restaurants and opportunities. And, you know, I just see the world kind of in a different way. And I can walk into any restaurant at this point and tell you if it's successful, like within a few points of what their EBITDA probably is. You know, I could probably give you a good top line guess if I was there for a few hours on like what their sales are probably achieving. Because like you just become this like, you know, this expert that's like, not that I'm all knowing, I'm learning all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in continuing to learn. And I know that I don't know it all. And it's still so challenging and fun. And the things that are challenging and fun about it are meeting new people, introducing new ideas into the restaurant industry, challenging the things that we've done that are traditional. You know, like we're integrating AI into our restaurants at this point. And like, how does that impact everything? And like, it's incredible, and it keeps me excited about the industry. You know, it's not just like, oh, like open one, make some food, sell it to somebody. Like there's all these new, just innovative ways to make more money, make a bigger impact, you know, help the customer more, keep the food hotter, keep it fresher, like all these things that you just continue to refine, and there's no finish line. That's what I love about it. There's no finish line. I can run forever, you know, and when you're an entrepreneur, you like running. You know, and so you just keep running, but it's what's fulfilling, you know, like it's not really about, I don't want to make $100 million and stop and like go sit on a beach. Like as an entrepreneur, that is not the appeal, because the run along the way is way too hard. And for that to kind of be the goal, because it will kick and spit everybody out whose goal that is, because it's too hard along the way to achieve that end goal. And so like for me, it's about the everyday process and the discipline required to be a great leader, be a great CEO, to learn new things, to provide opportunities for your team, provide opportunities for your community. Like all of that stuff is the stuff that's like fulfilling in life. And so I just try to lean into that as much as possible.
So as a CEO who's responsible for so much, how far ahead in the future do you look? Because one of my coaches has a quote. He said, see a little, see a lot, but see a lot, see nothing. So basically, if you look too big picture, then you're lost and you'll just never get anything done.
Yeah.
So how far ahead in the future do you look and plan for company?
He's probably a big Nick Saban fan. Like the process. Bill Belichick and Nick Saban are all about the process, and I'm really big into that too, because you don't want to say the Super Bowl is the goal, right? When your shoes are untied, and so it's like, okay, you got to really focus in on what we call it at Dillas. We call it win. What's important now, right? And so for us, the blocking and the tackling and the kind of like doing the things necessary to earn yourself into the next opportunity is the critical piece of it, right? Some of that is prioritization. Some of that is just focusing on like, hey, all we got to do is make just the next quesadilla. Because if that next quesadilla is perfect, it's probably going to grow our sales. And if we grow our sales, then we can open 100 locations. If we open 100 locations, we can be the biggest brand in the United States, right? You don't want to like skip to that end and then not be in a good position to, execute what is necessary day to day for your customers and what their expectations are. Now, in terms of looking forward, probably a year or two is about, how far we look out. A lot of that though is a requirement of the position. I think that it's kind of like for a football team, it's like if we tie our shoes properly and then we show up to the weight room properly, that will take care of our ability to perform in practice. How well we execute in practice and take care of our job will lead to us being successful in the field when the pressure is high and all that type of good stuff. So you're kind of building towards something. In the restaurant industry, a lot of like the future casting has to do with like how long it takes to acquire, negotiate, and secure sites. Right. So a lot of the sites that I've signed leases for, I signed them in 2021 and I still don't have them. Right. So that's like a 4-year kind of like, process of like, where's the customer going? What's the density gonna be like in this area? Am I gonna be able to sell enough quesadillas there? What does the competition look like in this area? What does my team need? How long is it gonna take to get this piece of AI technology integrated into the restaurants? Like all of those things, like you plan it quarter by quarter, understanding that some of those things can take a year or more to kind of like get fully integrated into the business. And so, I mean, like that, I hope that answers your question. It's a variable question in the kind of like really fast-paced, nuanced business world. Because it's not a linear, it's not a line. You know what I mean? Like you're not just like kind of like always just going down this line to accomplish one new thing, and then your season ends and you start over. It's not like that. It's never ending, and there's always different complications, different variables, macroeconomic, microeconomic, commodity. Things can change on a kind of a dime. Like let's just say that chicken goes to $1,000 a case. Right now it's $100 a case. What do I do about that? Well, F the AI thing that I was going to implement. I need to figure out a plan for the chicken. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so those are the types of external factors that come in that kind of like tweak that disfocus on what you can control type of thing. And so we can't control the price of that chicken, but we can control our reaction and how we're going to handle it in our restaurants. So that's a little bit more of like kind of how I would, define that quote and how it works for restaurants. And then hopefully I answered your question about how far I'm looking out in the future.
So I've had you for quite a bit now. So I have one last question. It's if you could tell your past self who was wanting to take that leap of faith, what would you tell him? Well, sorry, tell him one thing. What would you tell him?
I would tell him to go for it, be more aggressive, seek bigger mentors earlier. I think that a lot of the times, like I look for mentors that were where I am, or were just barely ahead of me. Whereas maybe I could have benefited from, somebody way further down the line, to kind of help me see 2 or 3 steps ahead on what, I was doing. I definitely think that, a lot of the decisions that I've made along the way, hindsight is 20/20 for a reason, and I was talking to a friend and mentor recently that's like, you can't connect dots ahead. You can only connect them from behind after they've happened. You know what I mean? Like, oh me going here and meeting Maggie led to this and this, that, you know what I'm saying? But you can't forecast, you know, like how dots are going to connect into the future. And so, you know, for me, telling my 10-year younger self, I would say, you know, trust the process. You're on the right path. You know, focus on all of the good that you're doing. Don't get bogged down by the challenges. It's just part of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that all of those things would be kind of the encouragement, you know, that I would be giving. I'd probably also say something like it does get better, you know, because there are certain moments, especially early on. I mean, you're just beaten, you know what I mean? Like you're broke, things aren't going great. And then you get another piece of bad news, like you got robbed, or, you know, like a piece of equipment that's super expensive broke or whatever. And like, it's just like very difficult because you have such limited resources, you know? And so as you grow, I always try to just appreciate the resources that I have, you know, because I've gone from taking out the trash every night to be able to delegate that. And then, you know, from having to open the restaurant every day, and maybe I've got somebody helping me with the trash piece, but now I'm opening the restaurant every day. And then you go from having to, you know, manage and do all the different day-to-day stuff for, you know, leading a team of a bunch of general managers to, you know, delegating that, not having to do that every day. And then now I'm like kind of in this realm of like, you know, getting in front of other business owners to encourage them to invest into Dillas, to either scale the company-owned side of it or to scale the franchise side of it, and to kind of invest in us, and with the faith that it's going to be a great, you know, investment, and like that you're going to be surrounded by great leadership, and that, you know, I've got a plan and a vision that is, you know, going to be good, and that our community is going to be impacted in a positive way. Like, if, you know, so the whole time I'm always like just trying to be so appreciative and grateful that I'm even in this position, because most people don't make it here for whatever reasons. Yeah. And sometimes for reasons that aren't in their control. It's not because they made a bad decision. It's because something bad happened, you know? And so I always try to look back and be like, wow, like, look how like many great things happened for me, how much support, how many great people poured into me. And it helps you, you know, if you don't ever look back, you have no appreciation for what's to come, you know? And so when I'm looking ahead, I'm always like, oh, wow, okay, I can take this on because I look back and I can appreciate all the awesome things that have happened to this point. And if nothing else good happens, I'll still be happy, you know, like, because I don't chase happiness through money. You know, I am happy and at peace all the time because of the decisions and the relationships that I build. And if you're a great craftsman, the money will always come.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
I generally do learn a lot when I talk to you all the time.
Good.
And your story is so inspirational for someone like me, like a young entrepreneur that wants to do that in their life. And I really appreciate you for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Hit it and hold it down in here.